I was rather astonished. I wrote or compiled a book of photographs in the 1990s called Baltimore Close Up. One of the photographs that I included was Clifton Mansion, and I had known it at that time as being the country residence of Johns Hopkins, the Quaker merchant who surprised everybody by leaving his fortune for the endowment of a university and a hospital, and had no inkling that the mansion was anything before Hopkins. But now I know, of course, that Hopkins's Italianate mansion was built around a mansion that had stood there before and had been owned by Yorkshire-born Henry Thompson.
This house is very special because it is the only home of an officer of the War of 1812 within the Baltimore city limits today. So it's the last surviving house of its kind of an officer that served in the War of 1812 in Baltimore City.
A Day at Clifton commemorates the end of the Battle of Baltimore and the successful battle, and the people of Baltimore who really saved our city and also really were instrumental in saving the country. One of those people, and the reason we're here at Clifton specifically, is that Captain Henry Thompson, the owner of Clifton, was involved. He and the militia troop that he organized, which means citizen soldiers who are protecting their families, their lands, again, their city, their country. He organized this troop of comrades who were also shippers and businessmen in the city. They were men with horses, and they were organized eventually as the 1st Baltimore Horse Artillery.
Henry Thompson obtained a position in the cavalry at the end of the 1790s, and he was promoted to captain and headed a cavalry troop. At the time of the War of 1812, they were part of the Maryland militia who were defending Baltimore, and they acted as dragoons or cavalrymen, mostly transporting messages between Fort McHenry and General Smith on Hampstead Hill. In fact, they built a special scow bridge of rowboats tied together that the cavalrymen would have thundered across in order to carry these messages. Also scouted the movements of the British. And perhaps most importantly, Thompson and his group and his troops acted as a special honor guard for General Smith. And they can be seen on one of the Ruckle paintings, the painting of the review of the troops on Hampstead Hill, and Thompson and his troop are seen directly behind General Smith, and in fact Thompson is on a black horse that is rearing up in front of the general, and so that really shows his significance.
Thompson's role is trying to determine what the threat is to the city and to report back how, in fact, what the British are doing. All right, but he's also engaged in dinner parties and in discussions with the general, the generals, both Stricker and Sam Smith. They devised the plan for the defenses of the city.
Baltimore was one of the up-and-coming cities in 1812 in the whole United States. You know, there were two giants, of course, remained giants. One was New York, the other was Philadelphia. But the third largest city in the United States, and growing very rapidly, was Baltimore. Baltimore actually became a target, but it was a target for a good reason. It was a place that the British realized was, it's sometimes called a nest of pirates, because of the fact that they were fighting this horrible problem with these privateers who were attacking all over the eastern seaboard of the United States, out even as far as the United Kingdom itself.
Now the city does a remarkable thing in 1814, 1813, 1814. It comes together, all political differences aside. The focus is, how do we defend this city against the British? And they throw up over 1 mile of defenses built day in and day out by every citizen. They had work gangs that were pulled together ward by ward Now, one of the things that we tend to miss in all of this is that this is probably one of the first greatest public works programs in the United States. What kept people from poverty in this city during the British blockade was the investment of public monies in the support of these people. And this is part of Thompson's plan. This is part of Smith's plan. Most people haven't really realized that what that represented was, here's the Port of Baltimore blocked. All the people who were associated with trade, doesn't matter whether they were rope makers or caulkers, what could they do? Well, they could continue to build ships. Think about this for a moment, all right? That's federal money employing people building that ship. So you're getting some federal subsidy just for shipbuilding. But the other subsidy that you got was that everybody else was actually paid to go out and work on these mile-long worth of readouts. They were paid 50 cents and $1 a day. There were work gains of 100 or 200 men.
The whole idea of having a citizen body to rise up when you need them to fight off an enemy was a concept that was very popular in the late 18th century and early 19th century. The fact of the matter is, of course, it didn't work very well because most of the time it ended up with Sunday soldiers who came out and pranced in front of their ladies and really basically weren't very well prepared for any kind of serious combat with a regular soldier. So tens of thousands of people on the rolls of various states who could be called up in an emergency. And we still have the National Guard today, but it's more a part of the regular establishment of the Army. But in those days, everybody had their own uniforms, everybody had their own weapons, and they could have a great time as long as there wasn't somebody out there trying to kill them. And when they were called up, actually in the case of Baltimore in 1814, they did a really good job because they had tried to defend Washington just a few weeks before with 10,000 militia. And they had been blown out of the ballpark very, very quickly because they weren't prepared in 100-degree heat and with British regulars showing up with rockets, which was a brand new terror weapon, to hold up, and they fled. And in fact, the Battle of Bladensburg, which was the battle at the entrance to Washington in August of 1814, was called the Bladensburg Races, and it was a great disgrace. We don't remember it much in the United States today. But just a few weeks later, this same militia stood up because it was defending its home base. And they had 15,000 soldiers in really good defenses with 100 guns, prepared for the British to attack if they attacked on the land, which they did. And so they were very, very successful against this British force. And the British were really taken aback by how good the militia did stand up.
The day at Clifton started with Civic Works, who is part of our legacy of service. So for 200 years, we've had a legacy of service, starting with civilian service in the militia, going through Hopkins and his legacy and the gifts that he gave to the city and the country and the world, with the university and the hospitals, with the fact that this has been a wonderful city park with lots of recreation and other activities going on for another 100-some years. And in the last 20-some years, Civic Works has occupied this building, has made a commitment to save it, and they started out this morning, early in the morning, with 400 volunteers who went out and did community service all around town, continuing that legacy of service. A day at Clifton started out at 10 o'clock, the historical portion, and we opened up with Captain Thompson himself opening the house and welcoming guests. Inside the house were members of his family, other workers from the area, and they were stationed throughout the rooms of the house to tell people about the mansion and the history and the various things that went on here. We also had militia. We had the 1st Baltimore Horse Artillery, we had the Baltimore United Volunteers, and we had the Maryland Light Dragoons. Several of those troops were up on Hampstead Hill, which is now Patterson Park, awaiting the British. who decided not to come.
Oh, say